Well, folks, I've picked up a new toy this weekend. This is an Apple IIc. This particular model is from 1986. This is a ROM 3 version, meaning it can actually use a Unidisc 3.5 or can be fitted with the optional 1 megabyte RAM expansion. Of course, the out-of-box configuration is only 128 kilobytes of RAM, and boy, you can do a lot with that 128K on an Apple II. Really, you can. You can even travel, so I'm told, on this thing called the Oregon Trail. It's a lot of fun. The Apple II was really the brainchild of Steve Wozniak, and when the Macintosh was developed, Steve Jobs pretty much wanted to shove this little project under the rug, but, there were too many people who loved them too much, and too many people were buying them, and there was too much support within the company to keep the Apple II project alive. The IIc was one of the last Apple IIs to be developed while Steve Jobs was still in control of the company. It was developed in 1984 or 85, I believe. I believe it was 85, but developed in 84. And the IIc was designed to fill two rather big shoes. The IIc was rather popular in educational institutions, or the IIe and the 2 and the 2 Plus. They couldn't buy enough of them, or they couldn't get enough of them, and they were relatively expensive. For the average person. So Apple wanted to create a kind of an out-of-box, ready-to-go version of the Apple IIe, which had 5 expansion cards, equivalent to 5 expansion cards, built right into the motherboard, which is a single board. True to Apple's engineering philosophy at the time. Fewer parts, better functionality, less trouble. So they came up with the IIc to kind of not only make the Apple II more affordable and more appealing, but to also make it more portable. This truly is a portable computer. It can be fitted with an optional LCD display, which would mount somewhere on the back here, and it can also be powered off a battery pack, which was available at one time. And in its natural setting is what you see here on the desk, with the handle serving as a prop rod and the optional monochrome, I believe it's a 10-inch display, kind of hanging over with a nice heavy-duty steel bracket. It's a very stylish machine for the time period, and it also was the first, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it is the first of the Snow White design language products. The Mac II series, the 2GS, the Apple IIgs were to follow, and I believe the SE even had some Snow White characteristics in its case design. This particular IIc was purchased, I found it on Craigslist after, and I'm not even joking, about 2 months of searching. I didn't want to pay eBay prices. These are going for crazy money on eBay, and even on Craigslist, people have these listed for hundreds of dollars, which to me is just not worth. It's just not worth it to me. Period. But I got this one. I landed it for $50. $50. That's all the guy wanted for it. He had no software. He had no real accessories. I already had this 2C mouse, so that wasn't part of the deal. But it worked. It was clean. I bought it. Had to drive 100 miles to get it. 100 miles round trip. So, here it is. Now, I do have one bootable disk for you that I can demonstrate it with. I have the modem manager. Actually, I think I might even have another disk too. But here's one, ADT Pro. This is a data transfer utility. And retro floppy, I will check that out. I wonder if they're still in business. But anyway, this ADT Pro program will allow you to transfer data using a serial cable from other devices. I believe he had it linked to a modern Linux PC, and he was able to transfer disk images to it. We're going to put that in there and boot it up in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about my experience with the Apple II and why I bought this one specifically. Well, when I was growing up, I went to public school. I was one of those public school kids, and my school district heavily invested in the Apple II during the 1980s and until the discontinuation in 1990-ish, 91-ish, when they discontinued the Apple II line. But my school had invested megabucks in software, hardware, and everyone knew how to use them. Let's just call it that. So when I entered public school in the year 1989, Apple IIs were everywhere. And I didn't really get my first taste of computing until I was in first grade, when we had to type out some stories, print them out, and we actually published our own books using volunteers and some donated materials. There were little booklets that they would make, and I still have them in my parents' house somewhere. But my very first writing assignment was on the Apple IIgs that was in our classroom, printed out on a Image Writer 2. And once I hit second grade, we actually had a daily computer class, or I think it was actually weekly. But we had a computer class within our specials rotation. I think it was once a week. And the first program I ever played was Z-Bug, the first game I ever played. It was an educational game. I believe it was similar to Donkey Kong. And it was created by MEC, the Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium. And they were the same software vendor that developed Oregon Trail, Word Muncher, Number Muncher. What else? Z-Bug, of course. Jenny's Journeys, Lemonade Stand, and there were a couple others. Just varying titles that were ubiquitous in American classrooms of the time period. My school district didn't really dump the Apple IIs until the mid-1990s. It was around 1996 or 7 when they actually finally retired the Apple IIs in favor of the IBM PCs that they still run to this day. Not those models, but they're still using IBMs in that district. So our computer lab was a mixture of Apple IIes. I think we had a Bell & Howell Apple II, which was the original Apple II. We had one or two Apple IIcs. The teacher actually used an Apple IIc. And it was on that Apple IIc that I saw my very first taste, or I got my very first taste of communicating from one computer to another at great distances. We used that Apple II, which was hooked up to a, if I recall, it was a JVC television set, 27-inch, using a coaxial cable, or a composite cable. And we were actually communicating to students in a classroom several states away. It was amazing to me. I didn't realize that computers, and of course I was only in second grade or third grade at the time, but I had no idea computers could be so, powerful. And that was my very first experience actually witnessing, distance communication with a computer system. And yes, it did take place on an Apple IIc. It was on an Apple IIc that I believe it was that movie, The Explorers. An Apple IIc. They used that to program, I believe, I should rewatch that movie, but there was a scene where they were using it to write a program to do something. and it was like a pivotal moment, and the Apple IIc was able to shine. But I'm really waxing nostalgia over the design of this PC, because it's so stylish, for that time period. It actually looks so, I don't know, sleek and professional, and it looks like it can conquer the world. And okay, so I'm just like bullshitting right now, but anyway. I still consider it to be my favorite of the Apple II product line. The Apple IIgs was awkward to me because it had that awkward, like 1-inch foot that sat in the front of the box, an otherwise clean-looking box, and it had that awkward shaped, front foot or toe that just didn't belong there. I never liked the 2GS for that reason. It's an unclean design. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But, so the Apple IIc, it solved two problems. It created a portable version of the Apple II, long before, actually, no, the Macintosh was originally considered portable. It had a handle on it, so. But it also allowed the Apple II into more budget-conscious homes. Because all you had to do was buy the Apple II and the monitor, and that was it. With the Apple IIe, you also had to buy expansion cards for everything you wanted it to do. For example, printing, serial communications, which was also, printer was also serial technically. If you wanted a mouse, you'd have to buy a mouse interface. If you wanted color, high-res graphics, you had to buy the graphics card for it. The only graphics card or graphics output the original Apple IIe had was composite video, which this also has, which is what I'm using for this monitor. But you had to buy all these additional components to really turn it into a powerhouse, when all you had to do was spend one low price on the 2C and you had it all. And as the 2C evolved into the 2C Plus to complement the 2GS, it grew in power and capabilities. I mean, it was just a great little machine, and it's probably one of the most unloved and unrecognized of the Apple II line, because it's not molded in the same color as all the other Apple IIs, and it's the only Apple II with an internal disk drive, except for the Apple III. So let's power this baby up. In typical Apple fashion, the power switches are located in the least convenient places possible. Right in the back here and on the side of the monitor there. And it's already booted. In case you missed it, we'll restart it. Come on. Oh, that doesn't work. Shut it down. Memory takes a while to clear sometimes if you do that. Normally, if you hit Control Reset, it restarts, but it doesn't always. There we go. I'm now going to show you how to determine which ROM version you have using the peek command. You don't actually need a floppy disk in the drive. You can just shut it off. Wait a few seconds. And then you're going to boot it up. I'll take this out. Alright, so what we're going to do is hit Control Reset. Command prompt comes up. And you type in print peek 64447. Just like that. And it returns with a number that corresponds to the ROM version of the machine. In this case, we have ROM 3. If you have anything less than ROM 3, like ROM 2, or I believe it comes up with a 255, then that can mean you... There's actually a nice chart online, you can Google it. Just Google Apple IIc ROM version, and you'll see what capabilities each ROM revision gave you. You can take an older Apple II, an original Apple II, either ROM 1 or ROM 0, and you can actually replace the ROM chip with a higher revision. And there's also a few other motherboard modifications that have to be done, but they're very simple. And that can give you the functionality, at the very least, it will give you the functionality of being able to use a 3.5-inch Unidisc drive. Currently, I don't have a Unidisc drive. If I did, I'd be in hog heaven, because I have hundreds of disk images already downloaded for the Apple IIc, or Apple II series, that I could simply pop onto 720K diskettes, which I have plenty of, and just run all these applications that I've grown up with. Unfortunately, I don't have a 3.5-inch disk drive for this machine, so I have no way other than using serial communications, which is beyond my skill set, to actually port software over to it. So that's kind of unfortunate, but if I had a 3.5-inch drive, but I don't. So what I've done is I went on eBay and I spent too much money, on some packages of software, stuff that I actually am looking for, and once those all come in, we'll start doing some more videos reviewing those programs and kind of reliving the past a little bit, which will be a lot of fun. That's what we do around here. That's what this channel's all about, reliving the past. So for now, I'm going to leave you with the disassembly process. Oh, I didn't mention that. This isn't my first Apple IIc. I actually got one from the trash a couple of years ago that was missing the power supply, the mouse, the display, the couple of keys are missing, one or two keys are missing off the keyboard, and it was in just generally crappy shape. So I put it in a display case in hopes that someday I'd find a power supply and a display for it. I was going to buy the stuff on eBay, but it was going to cost way too much. So I just put it in storage, and when I bought this, and when I went to go look at it, I discovered that there was a chip missing right here. You see how the chip isn't missing anymore. Well, what I ended up doing was cannibalizing that other IIc for its lower case shell. This one was in overall better condition, so I kept this one intact, but I just replaced that lower shell. So we're going to see that right now. Stay tuned, it's coming up. Here. Why a pair of Apple IIcs, of course. Okay, there's a little bit of a story behind this one. I had this IIc. I've had it for a long time. Probably about 3 or 4 years. Maybe even longer. It's been sitting in a glass case as long as I've had it. At work, I actually put it in a display case as a show of what computers used to be like. Way back in the day. I work in a school. I won't say where, and please don't ask. Be respectful. So, I got this with a mouse and nothing else. In fact, here's the mouse. This is the original mouse that was designed for the IIc. It actually says Mouse IIc. But as far as I know, it will also work on an early Mac Plus or 128 or 512. No monitor, no power supply. I never actually bothered to power it up and see if it even works. But I went on Craigslist, and I just actually a couple days ago, I went on Craigslist and I found another IIc. I was looking for a IIc specifically. Rather than buy all the accessories separately, I decided why not just buy another IIc. Well, it worked out that way. This guy actually was selling a IIc with the original monitor, power cord, or power supply, a couple of other cables, some discs, whole 9 yards, ready to go, for the whopping low price of $50. All I had to do was drive 100 miles to Boston, Massachusetts to pick it up. No big deal. It's actually 50 miles one way, 50 miles back. In either case, I snapped it up in a heartbeat, as a matter of fact, and here it is. So it's got really very few condition issues. The only thing wrong with this one, and I had it actually running on his table. It was running really well, but it has a chip in the lower case here, And that's where this one comes in. This is major condition problems. Missing a button, missing accessories, blah, blah, blah. So what we're going to do is we're going to harvest this little puppy for a couple of gizmos. I don't know what ROM version these are. In fact, the seller didn't know what this one was, and I've never powered this one up, so I don't know what version of the Apple ROM is in it. Is it a ROM 0, a ROM 1, 2, or 3? I don't know. But we're going to find out. And while we're on that subject, here is the monitor that the 2C shipped with. I believe this is actually an optional accessory. You actually had a choice of monitors you could use. You can use any high-res Apple monitor, because it has, I believe, a high-res display output. You can use a color composite monitor or a color high-res monitor. This is the monochrome phosphorescent monitor, and this thing is in beautiful condition. The picture is crisp and clear, and it really has no condition issues. It has no burn-in either. So, we got some work ahead of us. Before we power any of these up, I'm going to disassemble this one. One way we'll be able to tell which model we have here is if it has an internal memory slot. Now, the 2C was actually sold primarily for the educational and home use market. It was one of the less expensive of the Apple II lines. It had no expansion capabilities of any kind other than what it had built in. This had most of the popular Apple IIe interfaces of the time period. You had the unit, or I believe this is a Unidisc or a Disc 2 port. Depends on what model year it is. It has the composite video out, the high-res monitor out, a communications port, modem, or I believe printer. No, the printer used the serial port. The port that the mouse. Oh, that's mouse joystick or COM. Oh, here we go. There's the other port. This is for the printer. This is for the modem. I actually have a modem for this, so that's kind of cool. Not that I'll ever use it, but I have one. And this is the power input. Power switch there. The 2C was basically an out-of-box, ready-to-use Apple IIe, and it was portable. So it served two market purposes. It was, number one, it was portable. It had a handle, and the display was small enough to be, you could carry it if you really wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you could if you wanted to. Now this 2C has all the same ports. I have my suspicions that this is an earlier ROM, because the monitor has a production date of 1985, January of 1985, and the model came out sometime, I think, in mid-1984, 30 years ago. Old machine. But let's go ahead and tear this sucker down. What I want to do, I don't know if I explained this or not, but my goal here is to use this shell on this machine. The only real difference here will be the serial number won't match, but that's okay. It really is okay, I don't care. As long as they're of the same generation, that won't be a problem. And I think they just might be, although I can already tell you they're not. This might actually be a later model. If this turns out to be a later ROM, I might end up saving this one instead. So bear with me. The reason I say that is because the later ROM models, I think it's ROM 3, can actually support a 3.5-inch Unidisc without any modifications. Otherwise, I believe you have to modify the logic board. Furthermore, it'll have optional memory expansion. So, one way or the other, we're going to have a bitchin' Apple IIc in the end. And I really am not concerned too much about originality, as long as, I mean, Christ, who really is? We're not talking about an antique clock here. We're talking about a mass-produced Apple II of the budget variety. So as I was saying, this machine supported or served two different purposes. It provided the Apple II with a lower entry level and than the 2GS, which was actually the 2E and the 2GS are both in production for quite some time. I believe these were all ended at around 1990, when the Apple II expansion card became available for the Mac LC, which allowed you to run Apple software. And Apple only did that for educational purposes. The educational market was heavily dependent on Apple IIs up until as late as the mid-90s, depending on the school district. I can tell you, for an example, the school district that I attended. Now, I attended public educational schools between the years 1989 and 2003. And when I was in school, the Apple IIs were still being used until around 1998, when they were replaced with PCs. So that should give you some perspective as to how dependent public education was on these old products. And that's why it was so controversial when they discontinued them. I mean, granted, the Apple IIs had served their life, their lifespan, and they served it well. But the fact that they were still being used goes to show just how timeless these systems really were. Now, I've never taken apart a 2C. I've never owned or used a 2C. I mean, I've owned one, but I've never used it in this case. So I have no familiarity with how this sucker is constructed or where the hidden clips and catches are. But I have opened up almost every Apple product ever made, including the latest model iMacs, so it can't be that difficult, right? Oh, the power switches hanging me up here. What would be really cool is if I found a memory expansion card in one of these, if it supported one. That would be awesome. Oh, there we go. Got it. So. We got good top case there. Let's take a look inside. So the keyboard kind of floats on top. There's the handle. And there should be a ribbon cable. There it is. Okay, we just pull this forward, unplug the ribbon cable. Now we've got the keyboard liberated. This has actually suffered a spill at some point and would need probably full restoration. Where's the ROM chip? IOU, MMU, ANC, map. I gotta find the ROM chip. Oh man. I guess I could Google it like everybody else. It may not actually say the revision on the chip. I mean, who am I kidding, right? So, I see one possible expansion connector here. A full height, well, half height, 5 1/4 inch drive. We've got this box here, which contains something. And all this stuff I can figure out real quick with just 5 seconds of Google searching. But let's do things the hard way. That's what we do here at BBISHOPPCM. Alright. Come on. Unplug you. Let's see what this is. I really don't know what this is. I think this is an interface or controller of some kind. Ah, power supply. This is the internal power supply module. Okay, that's cool. I can dig it. Alright. It's really a fairly simple machine when you tear it down. I mean, really simple. That must be interlocked with the plastic shell somehow. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so now we've liberated the... Wow! Oh my god. This is a belt drive floppy drive. I didn't think they were using these still in the mid 80s. I thought they stopped making these. I have never seen a half-height belt-driven floppy drive before. All the ones I've ever seen were driven by servo motors directly mounted to the hub. Well, that's just bizarre. Okay. Character generator. Video out. Internal drive. Token. That's what it says, token. Where's our ROM chip? Everything's labeled. ENC. Alright, 2 minutes slow. Alright, what do we got? Mouse paddle. Hue adjustment for the, probably for the, composite. Well, let's go ahead and do some Googling, shall we? Screw that. I want to get this apart because I want to recycle this lower shell. We're not going to throw anything out, I mean, just yet. Or ever, because I got all the spare parts I'll ever need here. At least I'll have one working Apple IIc. So I'm going to put everything back together again when I'm done swapping parts, and then, I'll have at least a nice little spare parts unit to pick from. Although I don't think it's painfully obvious. I think this might be a memory expansion port. I'm not really sure about that, but we'll know in a minute. I'm going to do a quick search and see where that's supposed to be. I'll be doing that any second now. But first, I want to liberate the motherboard. And I should be able to see, actually, on the bottom side of this shell, the production date. Usually it's stamped in or molded into the shell somewhere. I don't see it. Do you? No, I don't think so. Something has actually spilled into that, though, at some point. That's not a big deal. As long as it didn't spill on any vital components, we're good. Let's take all these screws out. Alright. Oh, I missed one. Okay. We have a board revision A. That's all I know so far, but in due time we'll figure out the rest. Come on. Board's hung up on a peg here. There it goes. Where'd it go? Got it. So, yeah, 8200180 revision A. That's what we got for a board. Alright, that shouldn't be too hard to decipher. Not seeing any production dates anywhere, but the case is in really good shape, and we're just going to hand wash it really well with Dawn, liquid Dawn, and some degreaser maybe. Get it nice and cleaned up, and then we're going to fit all the parts from this one onto that case. Okay, so one mystery is now solved. The C65 or the 65CO2, this chip here, is the CPU. And if there's a connector that looks like this to the right of the CPU, this can accept the 1 megabyte expansion adapter or card. So we determined that this is definitely a later model, which makes it a little more valuable. Well, a little more usable. It can be expanded, and that's a key point right there. So we're going to set this aside. There's no battery on this board, so putting it on tinfoil isn't going to hurt anything. There isn't a battery on there, is there? I don't think there is. I don't see one. We're going to put it right there anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this aside. I've already cleaned the case pretty well. It looks brand new again. So we're going to put that aside. Oh, I'm running out of spaces to put things here. Maybe I'll... Oh, I got lint in it too. Crap. Well, okay. Now we know how to take it apart. Let's do this. Okay, what we're now learning is this is definitely a different animal altogether. The first thing I noticed is a redesigned power supply. Well, a slightly different power supply. It's probably about the same physical size, but it doesn't have the same metal shell around it. Okay, so let's dig in a little further. The floppy drive should be the same drive. If we were dealing with an Apple II Plus, we'd have a completely different drive in there. We'd have a 3.5-inch drive, but we don't have that. So, and I'm starting to wonder if we can actually use the parts that I intended to use in the manner I intended to use them. This one also has that connector, so this is really interesting. That is bizarre. Didn't expect to see that. Copyright 1986. I think that is one of the first dead giveaways because the original one would have a copyright of 1983. So that's very interesting, actually. The board doesn't really look the same. Let me put them side by side. Certainly cleaner. Same layout. Looking to compare the two. 8200180A, and this one is it listed anywhere else? I'm gonna have to pull that power supply board out. Definitely, these machines are not they're not identical in the production, at the production level. They may have had a couple of revisions between the two models, or between the two units, so that's what we're trying to determine what is different about them. 8200180A. Same board. But I'm noticing a lot of subtle differences in the actual machine here. This is really strange. They must be. It'd be really nice to know exactly when these were produced, because that would give me a better idea as to, you know, what we're actually dealing with. But you'll notice that this case doesn't have the RF coating on the inside, or shielding. That metallic shielding is required by the FCC, or some form of shielding, and Apple made liberal, extensive use of that coating on almost everything they made up until the late 90s, when they went to clear cases. But everything before that, they actually used that metallized coating to block radio frequency leakage. So this is, I'm going to take it apart and see what's under that board, because there could be some other form of RF shielding. And I really would like to know which one is older than the other. That would be helpful. But to throw things off even more, one of these could have had a motherboard replacement at some point in its life, and we wouldn't know that. It could be under warranty or not. How would we know? We wouldn't. But I definitely want one good unit out of the two. And I'd like to figure out what the ROM version is without powering these up, and I may have to power them up to see what they are. But I want the newest of the two, whatever that happens to be. So that's what I'm hoping for. See, these right here, these little collars, these are actually designed as conductors. So we need to put those back in when we're done. This has, it says 21113. I don't know what that means. Was this taken apart on 211 of 13 and repaired? That's very interesting. I don't freaking know. This board is definitely cleaner than the other one. Not that it matters, but it is. Yeah, no production dates of any kind. It's just really interesting. Very, very interesting. Of course, we wouldn't know what version the ROM was until we powered it up, because there could be any if it's on a flash chip, and it's not, because none of these are flash chips. But if it was, maybe they are. Maybe there could be a flash window underneath the chip. Who knows? Who knows? I don't. Copyright Apple 84. Huh. 86. 86. Looking for copyright dates that may be different on certain chips. They both have Rockwell processors. 8645-744. 838-6503. Okay, that's a chip number. 1145327. Same number. AMI Apple 82. Yeah, this is a puzzle. This is a mystery. So I'm going to have to do some research to figure this out. More research. I love research. So, what exactly is this material that we have underneath this case? What is this? Is this a, is this some kind of... It is a shielding. Okay, I see what they did. They switched to a metal tray. It's actually a stamped steel. Would have cost more to make than just spraying the case, but that's what they started doing. Let's see. Assembled in the USA. Aha. Okay. This is definitely an older machine, because I believe the first ones are made in the US, the later ones are made in Singapore. I think that answers that question. It's in better shape aside from that chip in the case, but we're going to try to save that other case. We're going to use that, and I don't know. I'm puzzled. I may do some more. Okay, so we're now going to see what exactly this machine has for, what revision this is. There's a simple command you can type in at the command prompt. We're going to go ahead and do that. I believe it will... control reset. I thought it was open. There it goes. Alright, right. Print peak 64447. And the value we get back is 3. 3 means that it's the third version of the Apple IIc. This one has the memory expansion connector, the ability to run a Unidisc 3.5-inch drive, which saves my life, and there's one other thing that it could do. But that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. I'm curious as to what the other one is, because, well, I'm just naturally curious. So let's power up the other one, see what happens. Unplug these. There are a couple of different versions of the IIc, and we're just trying to figure out which one it is. This is one of the better capable ones. I think the other one might be it might turn back an older number. So let's. Here we have one reconditioned Apple IIc, ROM 3. I believe it's a ROM 3. Keyboard really wasn't that dirty. I just cleaned up the shell, essentially. Tore it apart, cleaned everything. The handle was kind of nasty. I cleaned that. Underneath, inside, washed everything. And the monitor got a good external cleaning. Nothing major.